Cool. Thank you for your patience during that quick transition. I am Dr. Krista Matson. I'm a recovering middle school teacher. Anybody middle school around here? Yeah, that was like a solid 15 years ago. I'm still recovering. I am also a former high school librarian. Librarians? Yay, woohoo! And I currently work for the University of Illinois. I teach graduate level courses in media literacy and digital citizenship. I was fangirling meeting Jennifer Lagarde this morning because I use her books in my grad classes. I also support pre-service teacher librarians out in the field, so really exciting to be able to continue to grow school librarians. I am actually from the Chicagoland area, so I had a nice little 7-hour drive through a lot of corn to get here, and I'm really, really grateful to have landed. So this morning we are going to be talking about my favorite topic, which is digital citizenship. I know it sounds kind of crazy that somebody would pick that as their favorite. It's not the sexiest, but I got chosen for the keynote, so I got to pick the topic. Sorry, guys. If digital citizenship isn't your favorite, that's okay. I might be able to sway a few of you over the next 45 minutes or so to come join Team Digital Citizenship. Like many of you, I fall into some TikTok rabbit holes from time to time. And about a year ago, there was a TikTok trend that was, tell me how old you are without telling me how old you are. And all the different content creators would show different pieces of like pop culture from their childhood, some of their favorite childhood toys. And of course, there was a lot of old technology that made its way into these TikTok videos. So let's see if you can guess how old I am without me telling you how old I am. I came of age alongside some pretty notable technologies. Did anybody else die of dysentery in the back of their elementary school classroom? Yes. I loved coming home and playing Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego on a floppy disk on our home computer. I have listened to music on cassette, CD, MP3. I even remember this weird little toy from the 80s, which was called a pocket rocker. It had these teeny tiny little matchbook-sized albums that you would put into the device. And I don't know if it was a foolish marketing idea or a genius one, because who hands an 8-year-old a music the size of a matchbox and doesn't anticipate them getting lost? But it was fine, because anytime one did get lost, my Nana was there to buy me a replacement. And speaking of my Nana, she also made sure that my sisters and I had a set of World Book encyclopedias in our home. And that made us pretty popular with our friends, because who wants to go to the library to do homework if you could just come hang out in my basement and use our only slightly outdated set of reference materials? That set of world books started gathering dust as I aged. I do remember by the time I was about 17 or 18, my mom instructing me to sit down at the computer and ask Jeeves what could possibly be wrong with our dog. Can you go to Ask Jeeves and find out what we should be feeding her? Can you ask Jeeves if we should take her to the vet? And I remember these requests because in that moment, I would look at my mom and say, you know, Jeeves isn't like a real guy, right? And I definitely don't think he's a veterinarian. Clearly, I had already started thinking about my mom's information literacy skills, or lack thereof, when we started interacting with Jeeves. Even with my parents' lack of digital literacy, I was a really early adopter of social media. Does anybody remember the Facebook? It wasn't even Facebook, it was the Facebook. And at one point, I did swap out my MySpace profile for a place in this more exclusive the Facebook, which at the time was reserved only for students with college email addresses. Of course, my college was freaking out because we were getting lots of unsolicited emails asking us to join this random company who had been spamming our accounts with invitations to join. Now, speaking of college, I don't want you to think that instructional technology was not a part of my college education, because it was. My local community college was very forward-thinking about offering a variety of learning opportunities to students. One summer, I took a distance learning class. The premise was simple. You drove to campus, you picked up a banker's box full of learning materials, you went back to campus to take a midterm, and then at the end of the semester, you went back to campus again and you dropped off your box. So apparently distance learning back then was also equivalent to self-teaching, because there was definitely no teacher involved. Now, compared to all of this old technology, the iPhone seems like a relatively recent development, but it is a little bit older than you might think. Steve Jobs announced the new release of the iPhone in January of 2007. My firstborn son was only 8 months old at the time of the iPhone. To give you some context, he is currently a 20-year-old junior at the University of Iowa. So I've watched myself grow up with technology. I've watched my own kids sort of grow up with different types of technologies. And it is this growth mindset that I used when I was thinking about technology in the classroom. I was a really, really early adopter of new tools that I would read about at conferences, hear about from colleagues. I was blessed to work with a really awesome school librarian, hence my career path. She set me out on a journey of integrating technology very meaningfully in my classroom. Lee was the computer lab keeper, right? If I wanted to use the computers, I had to talk to that librarian, Lee Cook. Scheduling went through her, tech support went through her. Every time I would bring my class into the computer lab to do a paper or some basic research, she was there planting seeds of authentic integration and experimentation. One of my more memorable projects with Lee was when she introduced my students and I to wikis. Anybody old enough in here to remember making wiki pages? That was a little rough. We took a virtual field trip through Anne Frank's Hidden Annex. We used Web 2.0 tools to collaborate in new ways. I really had no clue what I was doing, honestly. How many of us did? But I was learning a lot about technology alongside of my students. We made a lot of missteps, but we had a lot of fun together, and we learned and grew side by side. Now, it was this growth mindset toward innovation and technology that took me from the classroom to the library. In graduate school, I worked on a master's in instructional design and technology, which is where I first heard about the ISTE standards and digital citizenship. I learned so much more about how technology worked and how powerful it could be when it was integrated well into teaching and learning. As a school librarian, I helped usher a full one-to-one device program using Chromebooks into a school of 2,600 students and 250 teachers. And we had some amazing bits of innovation happening in pockets around our school. And I felt very, very blessed to be in the position to amplify that good work and to help it spread. Now, in the same way that I came of age alongside some pretty awesome technologies, I feel as though I've come of age professionally alongside this concept of digital citizenship. Just like the iPhone is a relatively new technology in the grand scheme, digital citizenship is a relatively new concept in the history of education. During my master's program, digital citizenship was just this concept that people talked about in passing, mostly as a justification for why I had to take so many classes around copyright and digital law as a pre-service librarian. But it wasn't until I moved into the school library and my doctoral program that I became more interested in digital citizenship as a concept. We were moving into a one-to-one environment We were adopting new technologies in the library and in our classrooms. Legally, we were required to teach digital citizenship, but most of our curriculum were messages to parents and kids that were about stranger danger, password protection, things that would scare, I think, many of us into worrying about the internet rather than embracing the internet. When I began searching for resources that I could use to help me teach digital citizenship and show students the power of technology, I really kept coming up short. There was a disconnect between what I knew technology could do and what I was trying to accomplish and the resources that were available to me that could help me teach it. I started to use digital citizenship as the foundation for many of my assignments in my doctoral program, and it eventually became the focus of my dissertation. 10 years later, digital citizenship is still this concept that continues to stay with me in some way, shape, or form, for better or for worse. So let me give you a little bit of a nerdy history of digital citizenship. In its infancy, it really started off as a solution to a problem. This guy, Mike Ribble, is known as the grandfather of digital citizenship, which is really scary because he's only about 10 years older than me. And he was working as a network manager at a community college while simultaneously pursuing his doctoral degree. He was a former teacher, a former assistant principal, and his job at this community college was to increase access, connectivity, ran the computer labs. He knew that there was value in bringing technology into education, but he found himself really, really frustrated by the lack of respect that people had for these shared computer lab spaces. If you've ever had to manage a Chromebook cart, an iPad cart, a computer lab, you know how frustrating it can be when things are being vandalized, when cords are getting tangled up, and he was just so sick of cleaning up after other people's messes. And so he thought, maybe if I can do some research into common problems around technology, I can offer up some resources that could prevent these problems from happening in the first place. So he looked at things like physical issues, carpal tunnel syndrome, digital problems like viruses and malware, vandalism, and he basically developed these 9 elements that he felt all digital citizens should know. He thought that these could be really good countermeasures to potential problems. Now, just like the iPhone is relatively new, digital citizenship was not even a published term until 2004. So we're hitting just 22 odd years that digital citizenship has been in the educational landscape. It made its way into the first version of the ISTE standards in 2007. So interestingly, it was not even a concept that was in academic literature when my students and I first started playing around with technology in the middle school computer lab. Now, educational frameworks are always one thing, right? It's this big pie in the sky idea of what we could do or should do. And then there's that translation from an educational framework all the way down to the materials that end up in front of our students. And educational frameworks like the 9 elements don't always translate nicely into practice. Here in the United States, we are required to teach about things like internet safety if we receive E-rate funding, which I guarantee almost all of you do. And that requirement led to a lot of really interesting curriculum that ended up looking like the type of advice that I was giving to my toddlers at the time that I was raising them. It was things like, don't talk to strangers, don't go there, don't touch that, ask your mom and dad first, don't say that online. A lot of no, 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 no. Y'all remember that early version of digital citizenship? I'm seeing a lot of head nods. My personal favorite bit of advice from that early curriculum was the grandma rule. The grandma rule was don't post things you wouldn't want your grandma to see. As if, grandmas are like the moral compass that we should all be following. I don't know that my grandma would have been the moral compass, but a lot of our digital citizenship work in those early days was what I call bumper sticker lessons. Small enough to fit on a bumper sticker. Now, to be fair, the internet really was a much different place when Mike was thinking about digital citizenship curriculum. I would like to show you a very small clip from a much longer video called The Kid's Guide to the Internet. Ironically, friends, this video was first published on VHS tape. And it was meant to get people excited about installing the internet on their home computers. You can actually find the full 30-minute version on YouTube if you want to get down your own rabbit hole later. I'm just going to show us a small clip.
Our schools. But how do we even look up the White House?
You type www.whitehouse.gov.
It looks just like it does in our history books, only it seems more real, like we're there. Is this like sending email? It is sending email.
Dear Mr. President, my name is Peter and my sister is Dasha. Our friends Lisa and Andrew came over today. Sincerely, Andrew.
Little bit of a different internet than we are used to now, right? Talking to kids about that early internet, I feel like was a lot like raising a toddler. Our biggest goals were sort of to introduce kids to the world around them, the digital world around them, while we sort of carefully followed behind with gentle guidance, a little bit of nudging, maybe some punishment when they made a poor choice. I refer to this as Digital Citizenship 1.0. It's the place where we were basically warning kids about all the things that could go wrong if they didn't use the internet properly. And that seemed to work for a while when the internet looked like it did in that video. But in parenting, eventually those no's turn into let me show you hows, right? We want to start that gradual release of responsibility. And we saw a similar shift that started to happen with digital citizenship education around 2017. Maybe you were a connected educator in 2017. Maybe you were using spaces like Twitter, rest in peace Twitter, or Facebook groups as an educator who was connecting with others to share ideas, to share resources. I was very active on teacher Twitter during those years. And I think we were all very excited about the fact that we could be collaborating as a profession across boundaries. And when we got really excited about those possibilities, I think that we really wanted our kids to have the same opportunities. So I saw a lot of teachers saying things like, don't tell kids what not to post online. We should teach them how to brand themselves. Y'all remember that period of time where we were teaching kids how to brand themselves? Show them how they can build a resume that they'll be proud of. Show them how they can create a digital footprint that a potential, scholarship or college or employer will find someday. ISTE sort of followed suit. In 2018, Richard Culata, who is still the CEO of ISTE, he got on stage in Chicago at their yearly conference and delivered a keynote all about digital citizenship. In that keynote, and in many of the presentations that Richard has done since, he has spoken on behalf of ISTE in an attempt to redefine digital citizenship away from that list of don't post what you wouldn't want your grandma to see, into more of this conversation about the do's. What should we be teaching kids about the internet in order to empower them? I refer to this as Digital Citizenship 2.0, where we move away from the don'ts and we move into the do's. We talk about modeling healthy behaviors, empowering kids with skills, giving them what they need to be successful. Now, this idea of modeling and mentoring our young people works very well when they are in elementary school and when they're in middle school. But before long, your kids grow up and the let me show you how starts to turn into you can do it by yourself, or let me do it by myself. And as a mom, that's a really, really scary thought, because letting kids do things by themselves is not only a test of their skills, but it's also kind of a test of your own parenting, right? You're like, how's this gonna go? And so when you think about your kids starting to take over and do some of these things on their own, you start to ask yourselves some really kind of critical and serious questions. Have I given my child what they need to make really good decisions in a situation that we haven't talked through yet, or I haven't prepared them for? Actually drove from Chicago to Nebraska with my 15-year-old. She's working on getting all those hours in order to get her license in August. She did so well. Like, I even took a nap for a little while on the road. It was like, it's my third kid. I'm a little more relaxed. But when we got into Lincoln, like proper, wow, you guys have a lot of one-way roads, like a lot of one-way roads around Lincoln. And she was freaking out a little bit, and then like I was freaking out a little bit, and this was this clear example of, we haven't practiced on a lot of one-way roads. Are you going to be okay doing something that you haven't necessarily experienced or been explicitly taught yet? We made it. I'm here, barely. But I'm always curious, have I given my kids enough that they feel confident in their abilities to navigate the unknown without holding my hand? So here's the thing, I not only ask myself these questions because my own kids are teenagers and young adults, and they're starting to figure out who they are and to spread their own wings, but I ask myself these questions professionally as well, because our digital landscape seems to be in a little bit of that like angsty teen period. Okay. The internet seemed really, really full of promise back when those kids were trying to email the White House, right? Seemed so full of possibility. But over the last few years, we've started to see some more of the ugly, kind of like we do with our middle schoolers and our high schoolers. We have found ourselves asking really critical questions as of late about the power and the influence of major corporations. We wonder where we went wrong. We find ourselves having more nuanced discussions about the tools that we carry in our pockets. We ask, what can we do to combat misinformation? Have we unintentionally created a world of technology addiction? Are we okay with tech companies hijacking not only our data, but our time, our attention, our decisions? We seem to be having a bit of an awakening. Maybe this period of technological growing pains has done for us as a collective what our own teenage growing pains sort of did for us individually. It's gifted us with just enough bruises, just enough calluses to sort of force us to approach the next wave of innovation with our eyes a little more open. Think about it. We are treating AI with a slightly more level of like skepticism, I think, scrutiny, a demand for guardrails that we maybe didn't think about requesting during those early days of social media. Back then, the mantra in both Silicon Valley and in education kind of seemed to be like, move fast and break things. And we just dove in head first. But this time, our caution isn't just hesitation. I think it's a sign of maturity. I think it's a sign of experience. And as we are approaching AI with caution, we are actually stepping into our roles as intentional decision makers rather than just passive users of the technology that is coming. We know our digital landscape is complicated. We know that young people are exposed to more information, more algorithms, more synthetic media than any generation that has come before them. Way more complicated than Oregon Trail, right? And yet for years, our educational response has been to water down our digital citizenship lessons into these simple do's and don'ts, yes and no, black and white, bumper sticker lessons that look really, really good on posters that hang in our classrooms, or images that we share on social media, but they don't really scratch the surface of these digital complexities that we live in. If we want students to navigate a world that is inherently complex, we have to stop giving them binary rules for a landscape that is painted entirely in shades of gray. This mismatch between our simple digital citizenship messaging and the complex reality of the digital landscape is why we have to expand our definition of digital citizenship. I am heavily inspired by a definition from the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard, which frames digital citizenship so broadly. It says it is the skills needed for youth to fully participate academically, socially, ethically, politically, economically in our rapidly evolving digital world. Notice that word participate. It doesn't say comply. It doesn't say protect. In the physical world, our kids need a massive, diverse toolkit of human skills to succeed independently. Today's digital spaces require that exact same level of skill. But to shape that type of digital citizen, we have to be willing to do exactly what the title of this keynote challenges us to do. We have to think again. We have to question the history, the traditions, the biases, the assumptions that we bring to both educational technology and digital citizenship. For decades, we operated under this framework, I think, of like adult control, risk mitigation, kind of hoping and keeping our fingers crossed that if we blocked enough websites, had solid enough policies, handed out enough rules, that our kids would sort of turn out okay. But true curiosity and digital maturity don't come from following scripted rules. They come from learning how to think, how to evaluate, how to change our minds when we're presented with new information and perspectives, like all those darn one-way streets in Lincoln. Okay. In the book Think Again, organizational psychologist Adam Grant writes something that I think perfectly captures this shift. He says, good teachers introduce new thoughts, but great teachers introduce new ways of thinking. And that is the core of what we are talking about today and at this conference. A good digital citizenship lesson can introduce a new thought. It can tell a student what an algorithm is. It can teach a student how to navigate an AI tool. But a great lesson introduces a completely new way of looking at our digital world. Great digital mentorship means moving our students from the role of passive consumers into the role of critical thinkers. So what does that look like? Well, it means that they aren't just memorizing safety tips for a multiple choice exam. They are actively practicing critical judgment in all aspects of their life. They're evaluating the trade-offs between convenience and data privacy. They are questioning whose perspectives get amplified by an algorithm and whose voices might be left out. They are thinking in shades of gray. And this shift is what defines digital citizenship 3.0. If 1.0 was about compliance and 2.0 was about literacy, 3.0 is actually about empowerment. It is about teaching students how to navigate the complex, unscripted gray areas. In a 3.0 world, standard apps become kind of obsolete the minute you get a new app or a new AI model. We cannot give kids a checklist for every digital scenario that they're going to face. So instead, we have to teach them to look at a screen and constantly ask, what happens if? What might be the unintended effect of this choice? 3.0 is not about avoiding the messiness of the digital world. It's about giving our students the confidence and the character to step right into it. Now, when we look at that very broad definition from the Berkman Klein Center and we look at the sheer number of choices that our students and us make every time we open up a screen, wading into that gray space can feel very overwhelming. How do we actually teach these concepts? This is where the Evolve framework, which Dorian kind of shouted out in her introduction, gives us a roadmap. It breaks digital life into 4 distinct strands, and when we view them through a 3.0 lens, our conversation completely changes. Digital safety moves past don't talk to strangers and protect your password into things like understanding data privacy, algorithmic tracking, the commodification of our time and our attention. Media and information literacy shifts from just using tools to create messages to including a critical analysis of all forms of media, the hidden biases of our search algorithms, the impact of our information landscape on everything from attention spans to political polarization. Digital well-being goes beyond counting screen time minutes to actually cultivating emotional awareness, mindful consumption, and a healthy relationship with technology. And social responsibility evolves from simply avoiding cyberbullies to actively using digital platforms to engage with our communities, practice empathy, and advocate for ethical technology. In my 2021 book, Ethics in a Digital World, I encouraged people to get comfortable with those gray areas of digital citizenship and to recognize that sometimes there isn't a single right answer, which is so hard for us as teachers. We love to ask kids for the answer, but oftentimes there isn't one. There's not a single solution, and many times there isn't even a simple two-sided perspective. Let's look at how we can get our students in this type of gray area thinking in some age-appropriate ways. I'm going to ask if you are here in the room to have a little conversation at your table. Do our virtual friends have the ability to chat? Awesome. So virtual friends, go ahead and add your thoughts to the chat. Imagine putting this question on the board for your students. The question sounds really simple at first glance. It says, would you rather have access to all of the information in the world or only have access to reliable information? I want to give you a minute to answer that question at your table or in the Zoom, and make sure that you give your why. What would you rather have and why?
Take another 10 minutes
Okay.
or so?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, and then I'm going to keep you up here. I'm going to take 5 to just point to some of the resources and stuff.
Perfect.
But, yeah.
Okay. More seconds. All right, we're wrapping it up in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. You guys are already cooler than high schoolers. I love it. You actually listen to me. I think that this question seems really simple at first glance. A lot of people's immediate gut reaction is to lean toward safety and predictability. So you pick option B. Hey, just give me the reliable information. It saves me so much work, right? But when you force students to slow down and actually defend their choice and look beneath the surface a little bit, the cracks in this binary mindset start to show. And so this is where we can start moving students out of that black and white thinking into the gray area thinking with our follow-up questions. So yes, if we only had access to reliable information, Misinformation campaigns drop to 0, scams disappear, public conversation gets a little cleaner and easier, decisions are based entirely on verifiable facts. Kind of sounds like a utopia, doesn't it? Students can easily articulate these positives because they align with so many of the traditional digital literacies that we have taught them for years, right? But Digital Citizenship 3.0 asks them to push past the comfortable and to look a little bit deeper. So I can flip the script a bit and introduce some tension into the conversation and ask things like, well, who gets to be the gatekeeper? Who gets to decide what is officially deemed reliable? And suddenly the conversation gets a little bit hairier, right? Students start to realize that total control over information, even with really good intentions, can lead to things like censorship, erasure of different perspectives, really dangerous sort of centralization of power. So by introducing this single question, you haven't told them what to think. You've just sort of challenged them to analyze the unintended consequences of their own choices. And this is how we train digital decision makers. When we ask this final question, can you make suggestions to combat misinformation while avoiding some of those negatives? We are not looking for a single correct answer, because guess what? There isn't one. Like, I don't have it, you don't have it. Instead, what we are looking for is Digital Citizenship 3.0 in action. We sit in the gray areas so that students' solutions will be less likely to just be these binary extremes. Oh, just ban the fake news, or just let anybody post anything, right? Those are the far extremes. But because we've asked them to wrestle with some of the nuances of power and gatekeeping, their suggestions for how to fix this can also become more sophisticated. We can start talking about middle grounds like community-driven flagging or mandatory transparency for AI-generated content. And that's the goal. When students are comfortable living in the gray areas, they can stop being like victims of the landscape, and they can start becoming architects of solutions. The best part is you don't have to do this as a standalone digital citizenship lesson or part of a singular technology class. You can actually drop this level of critical inquiry directly into the content areas that you are already teaching. So I want to show you two brief examples of how this gray area thinking can look in an elementary reading or library lesson and in a high school social studies classroom. Now, of course, I'm going to teach some AI literacy lessons in my elementary classroom or elementary library, but I compare that with an elementary author study featuring books by author-illustrator Dan Yaccarino. We can use his stories, which often talk about life shared with robots, as a way to open up conversation about the fascinating pros and cons of future technologies. The kids will be hitting their reading and literacy goals, because I can practice all of those things with these read-alouds, while also building the foundations of digital well-being, social responsibility, and technology ethics. Now, fast forward to a government high school class. We can practice skills like reading, research, reasoning, claims, evidence, debate, all the things we do in a social studies, right? While also learning about civic institutions through a more modern lens. In this guided inquiry project, students aren't just learning about the criminal justice system. They are asking themselves the question, can AI actually be used to improve the criminal justice system? And by looking at sources that outline pros and cons and real-life case studies, they're seeing that there isn't just one simple answer to these big questions. In both of these classroom examples, digital citizenship isn't an extra item that has to get crammed onto the teacher's already crowded plate. Digital citizenship becomes the plate. It's the foundational lens through which our students learn to critically analyze the world around them. We seem to be in a place of awakening around technology, with more parents opting to keep their kids off of social media. Thank goodness. We have communities pushing back against data centers. We have schools rethinking when, where, and how Cell phones and other technologies will be used in classrooms, and I am kind of happy that we are in this place to pause and think again. I don't want my own children or your children to be blind consumers of digital content. I really want to restructure our teaching approaches to help kids dig into nuance that Digital Citizenship 3.0 requires. So how can we, as educators, reconsider the skills that our digital citizens need so that we are not just producing rule followers, but we are empowering critical thinkers, cautious consumers, confident decision makers, and conscientious creators? With that in mind, I would love for you to approach this conference over the next 2 days with an open mind. Think about what you might be doing in your role that could be rethought, built upon, improved on for the people in your organization. Ask yourself, am I thinking in the gray areas? Have I considered the pros, the cons, the unintended consequences of my digital decisions and my curricular decisions? Think about how the choices that you are making to support teachers and students to be the best digital citizens possible can maybe be improved upon. And also consider how you might grow over the next 2 days in your own digital citizenship skills. When I think back to all the changing technologies I've engaged with in my lifetime, I truly cannot imagine where we will be another 43 years from now. Yes, the lady told her age. We need thoughtful, empathetic digital citizens who can wrestle with those important ethical questions at the intersection of technology and humanity. I want my kids, your kids, all students prepared for the digital landscape that hasn't even been created yet. I want them to be prepared and confident for anything that is coming their way. And I want this generation to be the ones who are going to tame that wild west of the internet and maybe restore it back to the early promises that we were all so eager to believe in. Just remember that the children in your classrooms right now are tomorrow's tech creators. They are also tomorrow's tech regulators. And so if we want the digital world to be as awesome as we all hoped it would be, we can plant and nurture those seeds through a well-rounded and systematic approach to digital citizenship education. I truly believe that we've got this. I mean, I wouldn't be here if I didn't think we did, but we might have to be willing to step back and sort of think again. So thank you so much for geeking out with me about digital citizenship. Got a couple other sessions today that I hope to see some of you in. But before we break, I think Andrew has some things that he would like to share.
All right. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for kicking off our event. Thank you to everybody for being here. And if you've been to this event before and heard Kristen speak previously, can I see a hand? Right? Well, okay. So I want to emphasize a point that is an emphasis that we try to make with this event every year is that we love when we have voices that come in and share. But we also want to make sure that when we hear a message like we did this morning, and you might find yourself sitting there going, yeah, that's right, as you listen in, that we partner with those individuals and invest in embedding that work over time and not just have it be a great 45 minutes that we got a chance to get motivated by Kristen and learn a few things and then launch into summer. And so while that's great and sure that's motivating at times, it is a point of emphasis for us to see work instantiated. And so with that, I do want to highlight very quickly here before we move on for those that listen to this today and are going, hey, so Andrew, what's next? What are our steps? What resources are out there? I saw people taking pictures throughout, right, of different opportunities. And so here's the intentionality that we've tried to bring with this. So it was around 2 years ago where there were some folks saying to me, hey, Andrew, what resources are out there for digital citizenship? And I was like, oh my gosh, there's some great stuff that Dorian's doing at the Department of Education with asynchronous courses. Have you seen LPS's amazing set of resources that they've developed that you could access there? Oh, and by the way, there's also the ESU network that has a symposium every year for students. Have you checked that out? And people go, how do I find that? I go, here, and it's everywhere, right? And all due respect to each of those efforts, because it was awesome. And people are passionately doing amazing work in their sphere of influence through the channels that they have. And I'm so grateful to everyone that I just referenced there, and actually about 5 more groups, because we sat down about 18 months ago and said, can we get all of this sort of moving in the same direction and capitalize on the momentum that we can sort of build together, and through humility and people giving up their time and efforts and some rethinking, and with Kristen's support, we have the opportunity to make some moves in that regard over the course of the past year, and I'm just so excited about what that has looked like. And so for all of you in your totes today, and if you're joining us via Zoom, you can access this in the chat. We're going to put the link in there so you can get to the document that you're seeing on the screen at the front. We've put together kind of, hey, how does this then, where does this go from here? You know, for me, and how do I take this back to the role that I'm in? So what we have for you is the shared path with the EdVol framework. And so we referenced this here multiple times this morning. This is how we'd like to have conversations about this work in Nebraska. So it's not digital citizenship 1.0 over here and 2.0 over here, and some people understand 3.0, but rather we're all talking about things like media and info literacy as being embedded underneath digital citizenship. When we think about AI, it should apply across some of these, like digital well-being, for example. And so we're committed to that EdVol framework, and as such, we're going to host quarterly webinars throughout the year on each of the 4 strands. So if you would like to join, it's at the end of a school day for 45 minutes. Kristen's going to lead those because we need that depth and clarity and ongoing support, particularly as AI technology and others evolve. Through that, then, there's also the opportunity to take those asynchronous courses, which Dorian referenced, and we have more content that we're even collaborating on and bringing forward. And then the Support Ed site that we'll share more tomorrow, we've already outlined. You're like, hey, I heard those things you just brought up from even the folks here in the room. Where can I find that? That Support Ed page is going to have sort of a menu, I guess, or curated list. We love the local control that's available here in Nebraska, but also sometimes it's tough if the only thing you have is a Google search, right? So how do you sort of find something in between that gives everyone the opportunity to see things through their respective lens at that local level, but with a little bit of guidance? And so we're going to share that tomorrow so you can find those resources there. And then lastly, if you do have the opportunity to partner, whether it's with teacher or students in your district or in support, right? Like I know we got a number of state level leaders in here, or regional leaders, finding those schools that would want to have a representative from a district and a team partner with an ESU. There are 6 ESU sites, I believe, this year that are going to be part of a one-day opportunity in October, which is going to be led by Kristen Mattson, right? So for that. So we would love to have you get involved, because we really are being intentional about aligning all of this so that we can be on the same page and grow together and actually go further as a result of that collaboration. So thank you to all of those folks that are there, and please, you're invited to join us as we move forward with this shared work statewide. So with that, I'm gonna let Dorian kind of take us to book signings and the rest of our day.
Yeah, thank you. Let's give a round of applause to Kristen and Andrew. Couple quick announcements before we get to the break and the book signing. At lunch today, the NSLA will have its annual meeting, and that is in room 261. If you refresh your schedule online, friends, you will get the Zoom link for those of you that wish to participate in the NSLA annual meeting. Those of you in person, grab your lunch from the servery first, and then head up to 261 for that event if you're participating in the NSLA annual meeting at lunchtime. I want to get you off to the book signing, but I want to say that both Tony and Kristen are speaking right after the book signing, so we're going to go for about 15 minutes. If you got a book, or you wish to grab one of their books, if you want to learn more about the EdVol framework or AI with intention, we have free books. There is a limited quantity, so you'll have to queue up. That's a very British term, I don't know, but I'm going to use it for that. So it is my hope as we kick off that you find the next 2 days a wealth of information and support. And as Andrew was saying, we are intentionally trying to be thinking about long-term plans long-term sustainability around our 4 areas: artificial intelligence, accessibility, universal design for learning, digital literacy. And so we hope that you find the next few years very much a wealth of information. With that, there is still a lot of food. Please eat I feel like a lady having a party. Please eat the food, or I'll put it in a baggie and it'll go home with you. So please grab more coffee if you're taking a break, find the restrooms, grab a book, meet some friends, and have a great day.